Hello everyone. Welcome to another story. What if Deku made a robot? If you enjoy the story, please like, subscribe and share the video. It really helps me out. I did not write the story. The original writer is Kayadon. Please go support them. Now let us dive in. Speech. Thoughts. Tape 1. My name is Izuku Midoriya, and I am trying to create life. A fully sentient android who will go on to save lives. A hero. I know it sounds crazy, but I can't take it anymore. All I have is my mom, and she is so busy it's getting to the point where I rarely see her anymore. And due to my quirklessness, making friends is all but impossible. So I want to have company, then my only choice is to make some. Lucky I have, well, let's just say an above average intelligence and a keen interest in machines. I am making these tapes so in the event that an incident occurs that causes me to lose my memories, I'll be able to listen to these and figure out what I was doing. I have already started drawing up blueprints, and I plan on getting my materials from that beach where everyone throws their trash. I'm hoping to get her ready by the UA entrance exam, which will be happening in about 9 months. Hopefully, this will go well. Tape 2. This is not going well. To put it simply, I underestimated the type of parts one needed to do this. The beach has basically nothing strong or complex enough to use, and I don't have the money for the parts one need. If I can't find a way to get parts, then this project is done. Tape 3. It seems that for the first time in my life I got lucky. When I was searching for parts on the beach again, a black portal appeared and swallowed me. Next thing I knew, I was in a dark room with a very strange man. He has no face except for a mouth and outlines of where his eyes should be. He wore a black suit and was attached to what looked like life support. He introduced himself as All for One, and he told me he could help me with my project. I asked how he knew about my project. I hadn't told anyone, not even my mom, about what I was doing. He just laughed and said it didn't matter. He told me that he could give me all the resources I needed to complete my work. But he said he wanted one thing. He wanted me to make him an android as well. That is to say, he wanted me to make a second android for him. Not that he wanted me to turn him into an android. Jay just wanted to clarify that. This all seemed so shady. In truth, I probably should have said no. But I can't be alone again. Tape 4. All for One wasn't lying when he said he could give me everything I needed. Parts, better blueprint paper, computers. He even gave me a fully functioning lab. I can't tell you how much better it is to work in a lab instead of just my bedroom. Tape 8. Finally. The blueprints are done and I can get to work on the bodies for the two. All for One had given me instructions on what he wanted his android to look like. He said he wanted it to be a child. White-haired, male. He seemed to know exactly what he wanted, which made me a little suspicious, but at this point, there was no turning back. I decided I would make my android female since I was already making a male one, so I figured I would go for some variety. I know that a female android would technically be called a gynoid, but that sounds weird and I don't think it truly matters all that much. It's getting awkward to just call them the android that belongs to me and the android that belongs to him. Also, it kind of makes it sound like we own them, which doesn't sound right with me. I have decided to call her Tsukue, pronounced Tsukui. It means salvation. I named her that because I hope she can be not just my salvation, but salvation to many different people as well. Tape 30. The bodies are nearing completion. I gave Tsukue green wire-like hair with plugs at the end. These plugs will serve as a way to interface with any form of technology. It still looks like hair, but it's really shiny. It's actually really pretty to look at. Its bright green matches her eyes. She is somewhat muscular for a female, but not too much so. Just enough to support her weapon system. I've been trying to make her conventionally attractive. After all, many girls talk about how they wish they were prettier, and I don't want that for her. I want her to be happy with how she looks. The breasts were the most awkward part. I hesitated on giving her these, but one of the things I've heard girls complain about and bully other girls over is the size of their breasts, so my hands were tied. I hope I made them a decent size without making them too big. God, this is embarrassing. She will be powered by a fusion reactor, and on top of that, I've also made it so that she can absorb solar energy and use it as power in case something happens to her reactor or if she needs to attack. Oh, right, I should probably talk about her weapon system. First and foremost, her strength is insane. At max strength, she could most likely pick up a bus. Her durability is about on the same level as her strength, so all in all, unless she gets in a fight with someone with a powerful strength enhancement quirk, she'll be fine. She is also very durable when it comes to elemental damage. Electricity won't be able to do any significant damage, she's totally waterproof and extremely fire-resistant, although someone like Endeavor would still be able to destroy her. Her speed will be a few levels above the average person, although anyone with a quirk that can significantly boost their speed will likely still be faster. Lastly, for long-range attacks, I've given her the ability to blast condensed solar energy from her eyes. In other words, I gave her laser eyes. Her eyes will also be able to scan and analyze people. Although I can't do much more with her sensors until I can make her sentient. All for One told me not to give his android any weapons. I won't lie, this did make me feel better about working with him. Knowing that he could not use the android to hurt people. All I need to do is add the artificial skin, then I can move on to the hard part. Giving them life. Tape 33. So this is gonna be easier than I thought. You see, what I need to do is take brain waves and convert certain aspects of those brain waves and turn them into new brain waves. It's a lot more complicated than it sounds. At first, I was concerned that my inexperience would make things difficult. However, when I voiced this concern to All for One, he said he would partner me with someone who had experience with the brain. He calls himself the Doctor and he is a genius. He seemed very interested in my project and me. He asked me what I planned to do after my project was done. To be honest, I didn't really know. I guess I'll just join UA's support course and help Sukue with being a hero. Then he said something that concerned me. He said, "Why stop? You are creating a whole new form of life far beyond humans. Much like mine." I asked him what he meant about that, much like mine part. He didn't give me an answer. Tape 35. So I decided to use my own brain waves to make the baseline for Sukue. However, I also wanted to combine them with Kaken's. I've always admired Kaken's strength. His confidence, his willpower, his sheer desire to win. I would love for Sukue to have these traits. However, getting Kaken's brain waves would not be an easy task. I talked about this with All for One and he said he would take care of this. I told him he really didn't need to. Mostly because I was concerned about Kaken. However, All for One seemed to read my mind and told me that he would be fine. I did not have the will to argue. The next day, All for One gave me a drive with Kaken's brain waves. I called Aunt Mitsuki and she said Kaken was fine. All for One is a very scary man. At the same time, All for One gave me the brain waves he wanted me to use for his android. The doctor instructed me to use these brain waves exactly and not to make any original ones. I told him that would make the android an exact copy of a person rather than a new person. They would even have the memories of that person. He said that was the point. For whatever reason, All for One wanted me to make a copy of someone. After analyzing the brain waves, I could tell that they were cut off at a certain point. Given the fact that the body for the android was that of a child, it seems like All for One wanted me to make a copy of someone as a child. Given that the android would have no weapons, I figured it would be fine to not look into this any further. After all, this might be a personal matter and I don't want to intrude. Tape 49. They're alive. They may not be up and moving around, but their programs are now sentient on a subconscious level. It's kind of like a baby in the womb after their brain has fully formed. Sukue's program is taking the thoughts and feelings from mine and Bakugo's brain waves and using them a foundation to form a new person entirely. With new feelings and new thoughts. All for One's android, who he still won't tell me the name of, is much simpler. His program is just taking those memories and emotions and making it so they can continue on as if he was the original person. Also, as much as I didn't want to do it, I added something into her programming. A safety precaution. To make sure that she would never be able to hurt an innocent person. It's about 2 months before the UA entrance exam. I should be able to get her up and running long before then. Tape 52. Tomorrow. Tomorrow is the day these two will be fully operational. We have already installed the program into their bodies. Now we just have to wait for their subconsciousness to adjust to their bodies and become fully conscious. All for One took the body of his now fully complete android. He congratulated me on my success and thanked me for making him the android. A black portal opened and he told me I could keep the lab before leaving. After that, I was left with Sukue. Her fully completed form looked entirely human. The only thing that looked somewhat robotic was the plugs on the end of her hair. Although people would probably just assume that it was her quirk. This will be my last tape. With the project complete and my memory still intact, I don't really have a need for these. Still, I think I'll keep these around. Might be nice to listen through them again one day. End of tapes. Third person. Izuku had stayed at the lab that night. His mother had been working late, so he was sure she went right to sleep that night. He woke up to find he had fallen asleep on the work table in his rolling chair. "Are you awake, father?" asked a sweet and somewhat robotic voice. Izuku froze. He looked up and found Sukue. Upright, awake and looking right at him. Izuku backed up, startled by his creation, which caused him to accidentally fall out of his chair and onto the floor. "Ow," Izuku said. Sukue rushed to his side. "Father. Are you okay? My sensors tell me that no damage has occurred, but are you in any pain?" Izuku didn't respond. He was too busy looking in amazement at his creation. "Father? Is something wrong?" Sukue asked. "You're alive," Izuku said. His tone filled with disbelief. Sukue looked at him confused. "Yes. You made me perfectly. The fact that I am operational should not be a surprise." "You're alive. You're alive," Izuku shouted as he leaped up with glee. Izuku started barraging her with questions. "How do you feel? Are you touch sensors working right? Do you still have any of Kaken's or my memories? Can dash. Father, please slow down," Sukue said. "If I attempted to answer those all at once it would be confusing." Izuku realized that he had gotten carried away and apologized. "Sorry. It's just, I had doubts. The whole idea of creating life just seems insane, even after all the work was already done. I guess I still didn't believe I could do it." Sukue was still confused. "Father. Why did you doubt yourself so much?" Izuku didn't know how to answer that question. The numbers told him he would be able to do it, and after all, for one provided him with the resources, it should have been pretty clear that he would succeed. Still, to Izuku it was strange to think he could accomplish anything. After years of being called useless, to achieve something like this was. Tears went down Izuku's face. He had really done it. "Father," Sukue said, alarmed by the tears. "Is something wrong? Have I done something to upset you?" Izuku tried to wipe the joyful tears from his eyes to no avail. No, it's just, I did it." Sukue had no idea what was going on. Tears were typically a sign of sadness, so why did her father seem happy? With her sensors not being able to figure out the best solution, she decided that she would just go with what felt right. And so the creation hugged her creator. Izuku's eyes widened as her arms closed around him. It had been so long since he had received a hug. Izuku Midoriya cried in his creation's arms as he was reminded of why he built her in the first place. Finally, he would never be lonely again. Meanwhile, a small boy woke up in a room. This room wasn't familiar to the boy and he had no idea on how he got here. He looked down to see he was in a bed. Also, something that was unfamiliar to him. "Ah, I see you're awake." The boy looked to his side and screamed. "Ah!" To his left was the scariest looking man he had ever seen. "Come now. I know I look and sound different from what you remember, but it's still me, little brother." All for one stared at the child form of his long-dead little brother. This time. This will go very differently. Speech. Thoughts. Inko Midoriya walked into her house after a long day of work, ready to go to bed. She sighed, looking at her door sadly. "I'm so tired, I don't think I'll be able to make dinner. I hope Izuku found something to eat." After Izuku's father died, Inko had to work 2 jobs in order to allow her and Izuku to live comfortably. Of course, this resulted in Inko having a lot less time to spend with her son, which tore her apart on the inside. Inko walked up to her door and opened it, walking past the doorway. She walked past the kitchen and she walked past her son sitting next to a girl she didn't know. Wait a minute. Inko backed up to see that the girl was in fact not an illusion. "Hello, grandmother," she said, giving her a bright smile. Thud. "Mom. Grandmother." The next day, Inko opened her eyes and saw daylight. What a strange dream, she thought. Inko remembered it was Sunday. Her one day off, so she didn't have to be in a hurry. "I should make Izuku some breakfast." Inko got out of bed, which she strangely didn't remember climbing onto, and opened the door. "Hello, grandmother, are you feeling better?" Inko's eyes widened as in front of her was the exact same girl from what she thought was her dream. Inko and Sukue started at each other speechless until Izuku walked up to them. "Oh, good morning, Mom," he said, looking nervously between the two. Inko looked at Izuku with a baffled expression. "Izuku, who is this girl? And why is she calling me grandmother?" "Her name is Sukue and the reason she's calling you grandmother is, well, because you are," Izuku said nervously, trying to figure out the best way to explain this. The realization that Izuku would have to introduce his mother to Sukue hit him like a brick wall back at the lab. It didn't help that Sukue insisted on calling him father, which was technically true, and calling his mother grandmother. "What do you mean she is?" asked Inko, who was now freaking out. "Mom, please calm down." Izuku said, also starting to panic. She's an android. I created her, so that technically makes me her father, and that technically makes you her grandmother. The panic on Inko's face was replaced by confusion. Izuku, what does any of them mean? Izuku sighed. This might take a while. One explanation later. So, you made a person in a lab, Inko said, trying to come to grips with what Izuku had told her. Well, to put it simply, yes. Izuku verified. It was funny. Only a few days ago Inko had been worrying about never having grandchildren. Now here she was with an already teenage granddaughter right in front of her. Izuku, why didn't you tell me about this? Inko asked, her panic returning. I'm too young to a grandmother. Well, you were so busy I didn't want to bother you. Itsukulit. In truth, he knew his mother would try and stop him. Especially if she found out he had been working with such shady people. Sukue frowned as her built-in lie detector went off, telling her about her father's deception. She wondered why her father would lie about this. The aging, she didn't know anything about her creation herself. She decided she would ask him about it later, as she trusted her father enough not to expose his lie. Still, Izuku, why did you make her in the first place? Inko asked. Well, because I thought it would be fun. Izuku lied once more. He hated lying to his mother, but if she knew the real reason she would likely blame herself for his loneliness. You thought making me an early grandmother would be fun? Inko asked, now brandishing the trademark Midoriya tears. Grandmother. Do you dislike me? Sukue asked sadly. Inko looked at Suki's sad expression and felt her motherly, or in this case grandmotherly, instincts kick in. No. Of course not, dear, it's just strange to think I have granddaughter, but you're here, so as your grandmother I try to show you all the care you deserve. Inko said. Sukue's expression immediately brightened, and without hesitation, she hugged Inko tightly. Inko smiled and hugged back. Looks like I have a granddaughter now. She still wasn't used to the idea, and she was probably going to need to talk to Izuku later when Sukue wasn't around, but for now, she would just enjoy having a new member of the family. Izuku took a sigh of relief. This went better than he had expected. Father, would you like to join us? Sukue asked, opening her arm to allow Izuku to join the hug. Inko did the same and motioned for Izuku to join them. Izuku did so, and the Midoriya family engaged in a group hug. Izuku smiled as a tear went down his cheek. It was all worth it. Just for this. Later that night, Inko had gone to bed. She had to wake up for work the next morning, so she needed the rest. However, Izuku and Sukue realized that there was a problem. There was only one bed. You see, while Sukue did not actually need to sleep, it did help her process data by shutting down unneeded functions until she woke up. She was programmed to always sleep for 8 hours unless something triggered her wake-up protocols, like a loud noise, sudden force, or someone calling her name. Izuku was offered the bed in his room to Sukue as he wanted her to be comfortable. Sukue could feel things like comfort due to her sensors, which sent information like smell, taste, and feeling to her head and thus allowed her to feel it, in the same way normal humans do. However, it was dulled a bit due to the artificial skin, so she could only experience about half as much feeling as a normal human. Izuku also did not program the sensors to detect pain, so she could not feel pain. However, she had a different idea and picked up Izuku, threw him into the bed, got in and held Izuku down with a hug, making sure he could not escape. Izuku struggled, trying desperately to escape, but to no avail. Eventually, Izuku stopped and went to bed. Meanwhile, elsewhere, in the ruins of the Yakuza's base laid Kai Chisaki. Overhaul. His base in ruins, his followers slaughtered, and his quirk gone, he knew he was done. He should have never allowed that man into his base. He was the stuff of myths. A real-life boogeyman. And he had just allowed him into his home. I must thank you, Overhaul. Overhaul looked up at the man that had ruined him. All for one. The large faceless man stood before him carrying what was his. Iri. Thanks to you I now have a way to accomplish my goals without compromise. All for One said, holding up the unconscious girl. Earlier that day, All for One came to the Yakuza saying that he had a proposition that could benefit both of them. It only took one look at All for One's broken, faceless body to figure out what he wanted. The two had gotten into negotiations when suddenly Eri came running into the room in one of her normally fruitless escape attempts. All for One turned his head towards her, and after a few seconds, he smiled. And now Overhaul was here. Dying. However, I'm afraid that I no longer have use for you. And when I kill her tormentors, I'm sure the girl will be as trusting of me as I need her to be. He said. What are you planning? Overhaul asked. He might as well learn the reason he was going to die. All for One laughed. My retirement plan, of course. You see, I used to have it all planned out. However, a recent development has caused me to change those plans, and you were going to be an essential part of them. But now that I have this girl, that is no longer the case. It's strange how things have just been going my way recently. They'll never let you, even if you run to the ends of the earth, the heroes will find you. Overhaul said. All for One just laughed once more. I never knew you were such an avid believer in heroes, Overhaul. Or perhaps it's just your wishful thinking. Either way, I think we are done here. All for One aimed his palm at Overhaul. Goodbye. Boom. The next day, Eri opened her eyes. What happened? She thought. She had tried to escape and ran into a room with Overhaul and a strange man. The man smiled at her, and then she woke up here. You're awake. Eri jumped and turned her head to the source of the voice. It was a boy who looked to be around her age, with messy white hair and red eyes. He was sitting on a chair next to her, giving her an excited look. Eri crawled backward on her bed, but when she tried to move she felt a pain in her back. The boy grabbed the girl and gave her a concerned look. Don't move too much. Your big brother said you'll reopen your wounds. The boy said. Eri looked at the boy confused and scared. Where am I? Who are you? The boy frowned. Don't be scared. My name is Yua Otoko. First name pronounced Yoi and the second name is pronounced Otokeo, but just call me Yua. You're at my house. My brother saved you from some bad people and took care of your injuries. Saved me from bad people? Does that mean Overhaul is gone? Hope swelled in Eri's chest. She should know better than to hope. After all, hope had only ever led to disappointment for Eri. But, if this boy was here, maybe it was true. The feeling of hope started to overwhelm Eri and she started to cry. Her horn grew and a green glow covered her. Yua immediately went to comfort the crying girl by hugging her. Eri was shocked at this. The way he held her, it wasn't like anyone else had. It was gentle and kind. Eri let herself lean into the hug, completely forgetting about her quirk, which didn't seem to be affecting the boy. For the first time since Eri could remember, she was allowed to cry. After a few minutes, Eri's tears turned to sniffles. Her horn had receded into her head and the glow was gone. Well, that was touching. Eri and Yua looked toward the sound of the voice and found All for One staring back at them. Except he looked very different. No longer was he a faceless, with a body ruined by battle. No, now he was a large, well-dressed man, with white hair and red eyes. All for One had been restored to perfect health. Eri looked at the man and recognized his suit. It was the man who was with Overhaul. Aku, Yua said. You're back. Yua ran up to his brother, who bent down to allow his younger sibling to hug him. The two embraced. All for One looked at Eri, who was giving him a fearful look. Hello, Eri, my name is Aku Otoko. But please call me All for One. All for One said, separating from his brother and walking over to the scared child. I saved you from those awful Yakuza, however in the fight they injured your back. This was a lie. In truth, All for One used his forced quirk activation quirk on her in order to restore himself, injuring her back the process. But you don't need to worry about them anymore. All for One reassured. The heroes arrested them and they will never be able to hurt you again. And never? Eri asked, her voice trembling with all sorts of emotions. Happiness, disbelief, and hope the most prominent among them. All for One chuckled and patted Eri on the head. Never. With this a few more tears fell from Eri's eyes as she leaned over and hugged All for One. Thank you. Finally, her nightmare had ended. Later at the doctor's lab. All for One emerged from a warp gate into the laboratory to see the doctor looking at the news. I thought you were going to work with Overhaul. The doctor said the unasked question is why he killed the Yakuza. I was, however, I found a better option. All for One said. Oh? And what would that be? The doctor asked. The Yakuza were keeping a child captive. A young girl named Eri. All for One explained. Her quirk allows her to turn back a person's biological clock. It is quite powerful. The doctor laughed. I can see that. You look better than you have in years. All for One joined in on the laughter. I suppose so. So what are you going to do with the girl? The doctor asked. If you don't have any plans for her, then I wouldn't mind taking her. The things I could do with a quirk like hers. All for One shook his head. My apologies. I plan to keep her around. After all, she and Yua have gotten quite attached and it's a good idea to guarantee that he always has at least one friend. After all, his appearance leaves him a target for social ostracization, and I would rather he not be miserable for the rest of eternity. Ah yes. Children can be quite cruel, can't they? The doctor said. Yes. Although I suppose I should be thankful for that. All for One pondered. After all, if it weren't for that feeling of loneliness children get when they are alone, then Midoriya may have never started on his project and I may have never my brother back. True. The doctor said. Speaking of Midoriya, what do you plan to do with him? He is far too dangerous to dash. I don't plan on doing anything to him. All for One said, interrupting the doctor. I need him in case something happens to you. Ah. Didn't you take Overhaul's quirk? Could you not simply repair him with that? The doctor asked, knowing that if Overhaul was dead then there was no way All for One did not take his quirk. All for One shook his head again. Yes, however, I have no knowledge of how his body works. If say his arm is destroyed, then I will only be able to reattach it to his body rather than making it fully functional. I see. The doctor responded. So you need the boy alive. I will keep that in mind. However, what happens if Tamura goes after him? All for One grinned. I have a plan for that. Now shall we get to the reason I'm here? Yes, that. Are you truly sure you want to retire? Now that you have been restored you could kill All Might before he dash. All for One cut him off once more. No. I have tried to kill off the One for All users before they passed on the quirk, many times. However, somehow, someway they always persist. As a villain, I've had a good run. Many villains don't even get to retire, and until recently I had planned on being one of those villains. But now that's changed. I have my brother and I'll just go for my retirement now before something happens to mess it up. The doctor sighed. Well, are you sure about giving up that many quirks? All for One nodded. Once I give All for One to Tamura, my body won't be able to support having all these quirks inside me. However, I will be able to keep the ones I require, so it doesn't matter all that much. Well, if you're sure. The doctor said sadly. I'm going to miss you, old friend. All for One gave his signature smirk. And you. The next day, Tamura looked in horror as his sensei lay dying. In all his years with him, he had never seen him on a bed. But it seemed like the wounds he had gotten from the fight with All Might all those years ago were now too much for him. Sensei! Please, you can't die. Don't leave me. Tamura cried. Tamura. All for One said in a weak voice. I'm sorry. But I can't hold on for much longer. All for One coughed and blood came out. Tamura. I have one last gift for you. All for One said. Before Tamura could ask what it was, he felt All for One's palm around his face. Suddenly a weird sensation filled Tamura as he felt something enter his body. And just like that, it was done. Sensei, what dash? Tamura. All for One said, cutting his protege off. I have given you my quirk. With it, I know you can achieve your goals. Sensei, Tamura said in disbelief. All for One coughed up some more blood. It's almost time. All for One said. Before I die I need you to promise me something. Tamura gave his teacher a determined look. One that All for One had rarely seen on him. Anything. There is a boy, with green hair, his name is Izuku Midoriya. He did me a great favor in the past. One I can never repay him for. You must promise me to never bring him harm. All for One explained. I promise. Tamura said. He had never heard of this boy before, but if his sensei wanted him unharmed then Tamura wouldn't lay a finger on him. All for One smiled. Good. Thank you, Tamura. I know you will make me proud. And with those last words All for One went limp and the heart monitor he had been attached to flatlined. Tamura held the hand of his master with his pinkies not attached so he didn't disintegrate him. I promise you, sensei. I will make All Might pay. A few hours later. After Tamura had left, the only ones in the room were Kurojairi and the seemingly dead body of All for One. Seemingly being the keyword. After a few minutes, Kurojairi spoke. I believe he is gone. All for One rose from the table with a yawn. Finally. I was worried he was going to take my hands with him. It would not be hard to picture, Kurojairi said. All for One detached himself from the fake life support machines and took off the face mask he had been using to make it look like he was still injured. Have Yua and Eri been moved to the location? All for One asked. Of course, Kurojairi said. Did you send the letter? All for One asked, reaching into his pocket. All Might should be reading it by morning, Kurojairi answered. Good. Replied All for One. Then this is where we part ways, my friend. Kurojairi bowed. It had been an honor. All for One took out a needle from his pocket and injected Kurojairi with it. Kurogyuri reacted violently, his body spasming for a few seconds before he got his bearings. Trigger. The place All for One needed to go was far past the range Kurogyuri was capable of, so the drug was required. And with that, Kurogyuri opened a warp gate, far, far away from here. All for One stepped through the warp gate and found himself in a farmhouse. The warp gate closed behind him, and with that, All for One was officially retired. Izuku sighed. He had just finished hacking Sukue into the system. The Midoriyas were not exactly a notable family. As far as the government was concerned, they were just an average family. So it was safe to say no one would notice if they suddenly gained a new family member. Of course, she was registered as his sister, much to her annoyance, because someone might notice if it was listed that a 15-year-old was listed as the daughter of another 15 years old. Which was another problem. Sukue would not stop calling him father. According to her, calling him anything else felt uncomfortable. Which would be a problem if they tried to register the normal way. Hence the hacking. Izuku looked at the clock. It was almost time for school. Sukue had been registered as being homeschooled, which if anyone actually looked into the Midoriyas they would be able to figure out something was up, considering Inko's work schedule is packed and Izuku's father was dead, so no one would be able to homeschool Sukue. But once again, no one cared. For once Izuku was glad he was unnoticeable. Izuku got his book bag and met Sukue at the door. "Father, you are heading to school, yes?" Sukue asked. "Yes. Is there something you wanted?" Izuku asked, finding it strange she was just standing by the door. "I would like to walk with you," Sukue said. "I am aware I cannot enter the school building due to me not being enrolled. However, I would like to accompany you to the building." Izuku smiled. This is exactly what he wanted. He had always looked at pairs and groups of friends walking to and from school, and his feeling of loneliness grew. "Of course," Izuku said. Sukue smiled back. "Then it would be best to leave at this time." Sukue pulled 2 brown bags. "I may not have been programmed with the knowledge of cooking, however I believe I have discovered the basics of the sandwich." Izuku honestly found it adorable how excited she was about making a sandwich. "Wait." Izuku noticed something. "There are 2 bags." Sukue nodded. "Yes. One for your breakfast and one for lunch." Izuku's heart melted. Even if it was just a sandwich, someone made food. For him. "Father, we had better leave at this time," Sukue said, using her built-in clock to tell the time. "I intend to take the longer route, so if we do not leave within the next few minutes then you will be late." "Oh sorry, let's mhhhh." Izuku was interpreted by Sukue shoving and sandwich into his mouth. "No time," she said before taking Izuku's hand, dragging him out the door. Later. Like Sukue said, she and he had taken the long way to school, and for good reason. The longer route involved them going through a park, which was something Sukue had wanted to do since her creation. If they were not in such a hurry, it would have been nice to stop and look at all the flowers, trees and birds going by. It was a very pleasant sight. "I wonder why I stopped going this route," Izuku thought to himself. "I mean, I know it's longer, but deku. Oh yeah, that's why." Izuku and Sukue turned around to see none other than Bakugo Katsuki. "What the hell did I tell you about coming this way, Deku?" Bakugo snarled, his 2 goons snickering at his side. Deku struggled for an explanation. "Voili. What exactly is the issue with us going this way?" Sukue asked, cutting Izuku off. Sukue knew who Bakugo was. However, her memories of him were incomplete. All the memories of him she had been exposed to stopped after they reached the age of 4. "The issue?" Bakugo snarled. "The issue is that I don't want to see Deku's fucking face any longer than I have to." Sukue was taken aback. She knew that people changed over the years, but this was just so different from what she had seen of him in her father's memories. "Why?" Sukue asked, trying to figure out how different he was from the memories she had of him. "What the fuck is with all these stupid questions?" Bakugo said. "Why the hell would anyone want to look at Deku? I already have to put up with having him in the same fucking class, like hell I'm gonna let him walk the same way I do." "Yeah," one of the goons said in the background. Bakugo got closer to Sukue. "Who the hell even are you? Deku's fucking girlfriend?" Sukue glared at him. "My name is Sukue Midoriya. I am his daughter." Everyone was silent. Izuku's face was in his hand as he tried in vain to hide his embarrassment. The 2 goons were looking rapidly between the 2, and Bakugo was frozen, his expression stuck in a WTF look. "I could explain," Sukue thought. "But it appears that Bakugo Katsuki has turned into what is widely referred to as an asshole." There is a 90% chance that not explaining the situation will make Bakugo Katsuki angry. Path selected. With that, Sukue picked up her father. Sukue? What are you doing? Izuku asked, really confused and startled by suddenly being hoisted up. Sukue gave no answer as she ran off, leaving Bakugo and his goons in the dust. What the fuck just happened? Said one of the goons. Could Deku really have a daughter? Said the other goon. No way, she looks like she's his age. Said the first goon. Yeah, but quirks can do some weird shit, man. Said goon 2. Who knows, maybe Deku had sex with someone with some kind of time quirk. I mean, he has been pretty hard to find recently, maybe dash. Shut up. Bakugo screamed. The two goons back away in fear. You stupid assholes. Do you really think anyone would be desperate enough to fuck Deku? Bakugo said. Oh. Yeah, that doesn't add up. The first goon said. But then why the hell did she say she was his daughter? The other goon said. Bakugo glared at the two. I don't know. But I'm gonna find out. Later, while Izuku's in school, Sukue walked through the park with a starstruck look on her face. Her father had shown her images and videos of things like birds and trees while her subconsciousness, and had even programmed what they would smell and feel like, but to see them in person, it was just better. Perhaps it was because her consciousness was now fully formed, or perhaps it was something else, but for whatever reason Sukue loved looking trees shake in the wind, the birds giving food to their young, and the squirrels scurrying around looking for food. She loved the life around her. Suddenly Sukue's sensors picked up the sounds of a little girl in distress. Sukue headed towards the source of the sound to find a little girl trying to climb a tree. Presumably to get the cat that seemed to be stuck. The girl had tears in her eyes as she slid down the tree once more. I see. Sukue thought. Situation analyzed. Solution found. With that, Sukue ran at the tree and jumped, grabbing the cat. She then performed a somersault as she landed on her feet. The cat safely in her arms. She turned back to the girl who was looking at her in amazement. She walked up to the girl and held the cat out toward her. Sukue leaned down and handed the girl her cat back. Here you go. Wow. The girl said with stars in her eyes. Thank you. The girl heard her parents calling her and ran off, waving goodbye to Sukue, who waved back with a smile. What is this feeling? Sukue wondered. Analysis points to the feeling being pride. Saving that cat and seeing that girl so happy. It made her feel amazing. What was almost as good was the look the girl had in her eyes. That starry-eyed look made Sukue feel like she was the coolest person in the world. I mean, if I think about it, I am pretty amazing. Sukue thought to herself. I am the first fully sentient android made to save lives and kick butt after all. Sukue put her hands on her hips and smirked. Father truly is the greatest mind on earth, and I. Lady. Sukue looked to the side to see a young boy looking at her strangely. Are you okay? You just standing weirdly and yelling things at no one. Yelling? I could have sworn I had kept that monologue exclusive to the confines of my head. Could this be a glitch? She wondered. I will have to ask father about this. I am fine, little boy, Sukue said. It was simply a possible programming error. The boy tilted his head in confusion. You're a weird lady. Later after school, Izuku packed up as quickly as he could. Normally Izuku ended up leaving a little later than everyone else. However, today he was eager to get as far away from Bakugo as he could. He knew that he would be extremely pissed off after what happened in the park, and this idea was enforced by the fact that when Bakugo entered the classroom he gave Izuku a look that almost made him faint on the spot. However, strangely enough, Bakugo was nowhere to be seen at the end of class. Izuku pondered this as he walked to the exit. I wonder where Kakenwi. Boom. Izuku flinched. He knew that sound all too well. The sound of an explosion. And he knew better than to hope it was some kind of accident. Despite the fact that it was illegal to use your quirk in public, people tended to do it anyway. No one really got in trouble when they used their quirk in minor or ignorable fashion. It was kind of like jaywalking or speeding. So long as you didn't commit some form of villainy of vigilantism, people would just walk past a person casually using their quirk. Of course, this was not the case for people with powerful quirks. They only ever get reported if a hero is around usually. A guy with a strong quirk could beat a guy up in front of a crowd, and so long as none of them were heroes, then no one would do anything. This was because of three things. 1. They didn't want to be a target. 2. They expect the heroes to do something about it. And 3. They just don't care. This happened in schools too. Teachers and principals wanting to make their schools look better by having some students with strong quirks go on to hero schools, so they ignore a lot of things kids with strong quirks do. Like bullying and fighting. Izuku had suffered because of this, and it seems like whoever was unfortunate enough to be noticed by Bakugo was suffering it too. Izuku sighed. He couldn't allow this. Time to get beat up again. Izuku thought to himself as he ran to the main entrance. When Izuku got there, his jaw dropped at what he saw. Sukue was facing off against Bakugo, who had some scrapes and bruises on him and was kneeling down. "I'm afraid you stand no chance, Katsuki Bakugo," Sukue said in a surprisingly overdramatic fashion. "Father has given me all of your combat data, including all of your attack and pursuit techniques. Will you stop calling that quirkless bastard your father?" Bakugo screamed. "Who the fuck are you?" Sukue smirked and put her hand on her hips. "I am the ultimate advancement in human civilization. I am the peak technological achievement. I am the ultimate hero come to save the day from evildoers." She pointed a finger at Bakugo in dramatic fashion. "I am Sukue Midoriya, future #1 hero." No one said a word as they were all too shocked to even move. Partially from the fact that someone actually stood up to Bakugo and partially due to her over-the-top introduction. Where the heck did that come from? Izuku was the most shocked out of anyone here. Bakugo was the first to speak. "All right, that's it." Bakugo burst forward and prepared for his usual method of attack. Just as Sukue went to counter, Bakugo let off an explosion to change his trajectory. Target has changed course. Analyzing trajectory and comparing it to known methods of attack employed by subject Katsuki Bakugo. Conclusion: the target will attempt to attack from behind. Initiating preemptive attack. Just as Bakugo had positioned himself behind her, Sukue punched him in the face, launching him across the entrance. Bakugo slowly got up and readied himself to attack again. "Kack and stop!" Izuku yelled, running in between the two. Sukue smiled. "Father. You're here. Good, I have a few questions I would like to ask you." Later, Izuku said before looking back at Bakugo. "Kack and I will explain everything. I just need to do it someplace more private." Bakugo glared at him for a minute before saying, "Fine. Extras. Fuck off." Almost instantly all the students that had gathered to watch the fight scattered like they were running for their lives. After everyone left, Izuku spoke. Can we talk at your house? I think I should probably explain this to Aunt Mitsuki too." Bakugo scowled. One hand, he didn't want to have to deal with the hag and Deku at the same time. But on the other hand, if the hag saw Sukue call Deku father, then she would probably nag him for an explanation, and fuck that. "Fine," Bakugo said. "But don't walk too close to me. I don't want people thinking I know you." Later at Bakugo's house. "Izuku. It's been a while," said Mitsuki Bakugo. Bakugo, Sukue, and Izuku were standing on the doorstep of the Bakugo's house with Mitsuki greeting them. "And who's this?" Mitsuki asked, looking at Sukue. "Izuku, did you get a girlfriend?" Has stopped responding. The poor boy's face turned redder than ever as he emitted a bunch of high-pitched noises that sounded like he was attempting to speak but simply couldn't. "No," Sukue said simply. "I am his daughter." Mitsuki started at her for half a minute before turning to Izuku. "Explain." "That's what they're here to do," Bakugo said. "Now let us in, it's fucking cold." They all sat down in the living room on the two couches. Izuku and Sukue on one couch, and Mitsuki and Bakugo on the other. "So," Izuku started, "you know how I have no friends?" Mitsuku frowned. "Yeah. Assholes can't get over your quirklessness. Fuckers." Analyzation of the situation shows another possible reason for father's lack of friends. Sukue chimed in. "Katsuki Bakugo seems to have a large amount of influence at the school and seems to bully father to some extent. Therefore it's possible that because of this people avoid father in order to make themselves targets." She figured all that out in just one day. Izuku though. He was completely flabbergasted. "How well did I program her?" "Oh really?" Mitsuki said, glaring at her son. Smack. "Fuck." Bakugo yelled as he held the back of his head. "When they leave, you and I are gonna talk," Mitsuki said, a dangerously low tone. Bakugo swiftly regretted letting Izuku and Sukue follow him home. Sukue smiled. "It seems that my data on Mitsuki Bakugo is not as outdated as her son's." Izuku regained her composure and spoke up. "Be back to what I was saying. I got really lonely. So I made myself some company. Literally." The two Bakugos gave him confused looks and Izuku realized he would need to clarify. Maybe it would be better to show you what I mean, Izuku said before turning to Sukue. 5798. Suddenly Sukue's arm opened up, revealing the metallic part beneath it. Both Mitsuki's and Bakugo's eyes were as wide as dinner plates when they saw this. Wait, so she's a fucking robot? Bakugo shouted. Android. Sukue corrected. Well, technically she's a gynoid, but android sounds cooler, Izuku said. Mitsuki got up and took a close look at Sukue. She looks so alive though. Well, she is alive. Izuku clarified. She the world's first fully sentient android. She's just as alive as anyone. How the fuck did you do that? Mitsuki asked in shock. Well, it's complicated. But to put it simply, I just took a pair of brain waves and used them as a baseline for her program to make completely new brain waves. Mitsuki gave him another confused look before shaking her head and leaning back on the couch. I have no idea what any of that means, and I have a feeling I'll never understand any of it, but hey, good for you. At least you have a friend now. Or daughter, I guess? Father. I thought only your brainwaves were used in my creation. Yet you said that a pair of brainwaves was used. Who was the other person? Sukue asked. Crap. Izuku thought to himself. I shouldn't have said that. Izuku stuttered. I'll tell you later. Father, you are aware you gave me a lie detector, right? Sukue asked. I forgot about that? Izuku was starting to sweat. If he told Sukue, then she would wonder how he got Bakugo's brain waves, and then he would have to tell her about All for One. And Izuku really did not want anyone to know about his collaboration with that man. He was basically the embodiment of shady. First we should probably get your arm out of repair mode, Izuku said. Sukue looked down at her opened-up arm. I didn't even know I had a repair mode. How many things about myself do I not know? 6973, Izuku said, ignoring her question. Sukue looked down at her arm, but nothing happens. It remained in repair mode. Whoops. Izuku said. I said the wrong code. 7291. In an instant, Sukue's arm closed up and returned to its normal state. Sorry about that, Izuku said. Really, Sukue, I will tell you later. Your lie detector must be malfunctioning. Sukue felt that something was off. It felt like her father was lying, but her lie detector was not going off. So he must be telling the truth. Right? Little did she know that when Izuku accidentally said the wrong code, what he really did was deactivate her lie detector. Izuku had a bunch of codes to deactivate or reactivate certain parts of Sukue, all of which would only respond to his voice. Of course, there were also certain things Izuku could not deactivate, like her fusion reactor or her brainwave processor. Anyway, Izuku said in a somewhat nervous tone. I just wanted to tell you about her so you didn't get confused. We should be going now, after I wouldn't want Mom to get upset. Izuku grabbed Sukue by the hand and ran out of the Bakugo's house at speeds even Katsuki had never seen him run. After a few minutes, Mitsuki spoke. Something's not right. I don't think I've ever seen him act so shifty. Yeah. It's like he was hiding something. Bakugo added. Mitsuki shook her head. Whatever it is, it's probably best to just let it go. After all, it's Izuku. Whatever he's doing, I'm sure he would never dream of hurting someone. Meanwhile, with All Might, Toshinori Yagi was searching through his mail when he saw something that made his heart stop. A letter with the words from All for One to All Might. All Might immediately dropped all the other papers and shakily opened the letter. Dear All Might. How have you been? Not well, I hope. After all, I myself have not been doing very well. And it only gets worse every day. By the time you read this, I should already be 6 feet under. I'm sure you're leaping for joy, but I wouldn't be too quick to celebrate. You see, if there is one thing I would ever thank you for, it would be giving me something to do. There was a long time where I was so very bored with absolutely nothing to do. Then you showed up, ruined me completely, and gave me a brand new goal. Making you suffer. For years I thought up various ways to hurt you. Kill that old man you call a teacher. Ruin your public image. Perhaps turn you detective friend into some kind of monster under my control. But one day an opportunity came to me. You remember Nana Shimura, right? Your former master. The one I killed. The one that died in a more pathetic way than any of the previous wielders of One for All. That Nana Shimura. Well, it just so happens that I stumbled across her grandson. He was suffering so much. And there were no heroes there to help him. So out the kindness of my heart, I took the boy in. Don't worry, he's doing well. I even gave him a special gift that I'm sure you'll be ecstatic to see. He has been very eager to meet you and I'm sure you'll be seeing him very, very soon, so look forward to it. He might just be the last person you ever meet. Anyway, this is goodbye All Might. My only regret was that I wasn't able to tear you to pieces myself. Sincerely. All for One. There was a mix of emotions that went through All Might as he read the letter. But the most prevalent among them was fear. I need to get this to Naomasa. Now. Sukue couldn't be more excited. After 2 months of testing and running simulations, today was finally the day of the UA entrance exam. Are you ready? Izuku asked her as they walked to the gates of UA. Izuku was going to take the support course exam, so of course, the two walked there together. Even if Izuku's exam wasn't for another hour after the hero exam. Of course, father. Sukue said. All systems are fully operational and ready for combat. All data on the entrance exam has been fully analyzed. Awesomeness level at 1000%. Suis-tu qu'à confident pose? I am ready to be number one. Did she really say awesomeness levels? Izuku thought to himself. Unfortunately, this distraction caused him to not see a rock in his path and trip. Sukue was about to act when she saw someone rush past her. Izuku never hit the ground and instead found himself floating above the ground. Huh? Izuku said. Suddenly he found himself being lifted upright. Face to face with a girl. A very pretty girl. Izuku's face turned crimson and his heart started beating at speeds that would put Ingenium to shame. Are you okay? The girl asked, concern showing on her face. Ah. What do ido? Izuku was freaking out hard. The girl then came closer. You look really red, are you sick? Unfortunately, she had gotten a bit too close for Izuku to handle and so the boy collapsed onto the floor unconscious. What? Yelled the now extremely confused girl. Father! Sukue shouted as she ran to her creator's aid. Wait, what? Asked the now even more confused girl. After confirming that her father was all right, Sukue faced the girl. I apologize. She said. Father is not quite adept at social interactions. He is especially bad at speaking to members of the opposite sex. Ok? The girl said, still not sure what exactly was happening. Why did you call him father though? Because he is my father, Sukue answered. But he looks like he's 15. The girl said. And you look like you're 15. Yes, Sukue responded. There was a pause as the girl tried to comprehend the situation. Well, I need to go now, bye. The girl said, walking away from the two. What an interesting quirk she had. Sukue thought to herself. Hey! Sukue turned around to see Bakugo walking up behind them. What the fuck happened to him? He asked, looking at Izuku. He talked to a girl, Sukue answered. There was a short pause before Bakugo just walked away. I think that may be the nicest interaction I've had with him. Sukue thought to herself. Suddenly she realized something. The test is going to start soon. I'd better get father to a teacher so they can take him to the nurse or something. With that, Sukue picked up Izuku and ran off to find a teacher. After a few minutes, she found Midnight directing students to the exam room. Exclamation point. Sukue yelled to get the teacher's attention. Midnight looked over to see Sukue holding the still unconscious Izuku. She walked over to her and asked. What happened? He talked to a girl, Sukue answered. Midnight cringed. Yikes. Poor kid probably hasn't talked much to girls. Sukue shook her head. He hasn't talked much to anyone really. Other than me, that is. Oh, are you his friend or sister or something? Midnight asked. I am his daughter, Sukue answered. There was yet another pause as Midnight processed this unexpected answer. I am sorry, could you repeat that? Midnight asked, wondering if what she had was correct. I am his daughter, Sukue repeated. He is my creator and therefore my father. It is very simple. Wait. What do you mean creator? Midnight asked. Like, are you part of his quirk or did he use his quirk to create you? Sukue shook her head. No, father is quirkless. Perhaps it would be easier if I introduced myself. Suddenly Sukue put her hands to her hips and gave Midnight a proud smile. I am Sukue Midoriya, the first sentient android. And this is my father. The one who created me. Izuku Midoriya. No one said anything as Midnight as well as every other student around her gave her strange and confused looks. Sukue frowned. Do you not believe me? Here, let me show you. Sukue reached for the back of her head. Specifically for the small slit in her artificial skin before opening it and revealing her metallic face to everyone around. Tada! She said. A few hours later. Izuku slowly and groggily opened his eyes a little. What happened? Hello, Midoriya. A voice said. Izuku looked up to see Principal Nizu himself sitting on the opposite end of a desk. Izuku's eyes shot fully open and he jerked upright. Principal Nizu. He nodded. Yup, that's me. So we heard that you created sentient life. Izuku's eyes somehow got even wider. How did you dash? She told us. Said a man Izuku didn't recognize. My name is Naomasa Tsukachi. I've been brought in to make sure you're telling the truth. My quirk makes me a human lie detector so lying won't work. What is it with me and lie detectors? Izuku thought to himself. And why did Tsukue tell them? I specifically told her to keep it a secret. So, Izuku Midoriya. Nizu said, regaining the boy's attention. Our files say that Tsukue Midoriya was adopted by your mother and was homeschooled. However, looking at your mother's work schedule, that would be impossible. Now she has revealed herself to be an android and says you are her creator. Is this true? Izuku had no choice. With Naomasa here, lying was futile. Yes. He's telling the truth, Naomasa said with wide eyes. He almost didn't believe it. A 15-year-old boy creates life. It just sounded so bizarre. Well then, first I would like to congratulate you on this amazing scientific achievement, Nizu said. And next I would like to ask you a few more questions. Izuku gulped. Thank you, and I figured as much. First, why did you create her in the first place? Nizu asked. Izuku looked away sheepishly and muttered something. Please speak up, Nizu said. Because I was lonely, Izuku admitted. One of the many reasons Izuku wanted to keep this a secret was because of how pathetic it sounded. He couldn't make friends, so he had to make one himself. Naomasa frowned. It was a pretty sad answer. One that said a lot about Izuku and the life he lived, the fact that he was quirkless further painting a picture in the mind of the two adults about what his life was like. I see, Nizu said. Next question. Where did you get the resources to create her? She allowed us to analyze her, and while we were unable to look at her inner mechanisms, we can tell the materials and parts used in her creation would not have been available to someone who wasn't incredibly wealthy. Izuku started to sweat. He knew he probably wasn't getting out of here without telling them about All for One, but he had still held hope that he would be able to worm his way out of it. Well, Amusia? Izuku stuttered, trying to think of an answer. Someone showed up and offered me the resources. Naomasa gave the kid a suspicious look. You're telling the truth, but you're obviously hiding something. Kid, you know you're not getting out of this, just tell us everything. The pressure was too much. Izuku cracked. When I was looking for parts, a portal sucked me up and I met this man. He said his name was All for One. The statement sent shock throughout the room. Nizu even lost his ever-present smile. Naomasa looked at Nizu and the two nodded. Give us a moment, Nizu said. He and Naomasa walked outside his office. We need to call All Might, Nizu said. Half an hour later. Nizu, Naomasa, you said I was needed for something. All Might said as he walked into the office. Then he spotted Izuku and freaked out slightly. Boom. Hello, there, young man. Hello, Izuku said. Yagi, this is Izuku Midoriya, Nizu said, introducing the two. He is responsible for creating the world's first sentient android. Oh, All Might said. That's good? You have no idea what that means, do you? Naomasa asked. Not at all. All Might admitted. He made a robot that's alive. Nizu simplified. Oh, All Might said, now giving the appropriate reaction. That's amazing. Yes, it's a miraculous achievement, Nizu said, praising the boy. However, it is also a suspicious one. Most suspiciously was how he managed to get his hands on the materials required to pull off such a feat. Midoriya, would you mind repeating what you said to Yagi? Izuku faced the skeleton like a man with fear written across his face. I was looking for parts when a portal showed up and swallowed me. After that, I met a man who said he would give me the parts one needed. His name was All for One. All Might's heart skipped a beat. What? All for One, Izuku repeated. He was a large man whose face was damaged. To the point where he basically didn't have one. He always had life support machines attached to him and an oxygen mask. He wore a dark suit and never seemed to change out of it. Dread filled All Might at the description. Last time he fought All for One, he caved the villain's head in. And all that resulted in was him not having a face. And he was still wearing that fucking suit. Were you aware that he was a villain? Naomasa asked. Izuku looked down, uncomfortable at being the center of attention. No. But I did suspect he was. And you continued to work with him despite that? Nizu asked. Tears started rolling down the boy's eyes as the pressure and attention was rapidly overwhelming him. I didn't have a choice. Do you know how impossible it is to make friends when you're quirkless? And my mom has to work 2 jobs so that way we can stay afloat money-wise. It was either work with him and make the androids or be alone for the rest of my life. Izuku was crying now. He really didn't want to work with All for One, but he justified it to himself by reminding himself that he didn't know if All for One was a villain, making excuses for his shifty behavior and evil laugh. But now here he was with all his suspicions confirmed, and Izuku felt guilty as hell. All Might gave the boy a look of pity. He knew exactly how hard it was to make friends when you're quirkless. All Might himself wasn't able to make any friends until Nana passed down One for All onto him. But while the word quirkless caught All Might's attention, there was another word that caught Nizu's attention. But before he could ask questions about it, he would have to calm down the boy first. Nizu pulled out a box of tissues and put them in front of the boy. It's okay, Midoriya. You had no idea that All for One was a villain, seeing as he is a government secret and listed as officially dead. You will not be arrested or anything like that. We just want information. This managed to calm Izuku down, if only slightly. He took the tissues and wiped away most of the tears and snot that had run down in his eyes and nose. I'm sorry, Izuku said. But deep down I did know that he was a villain. And legally, since All for One is not publicly known, even if you did work with him, you still technically have not broken the law so long as you didn't perform any illegal actions yourself. Did you perform any illegal actions? And not to my knowledge. Izuku stuttered. But then you're fine, Nizu said, cutting him off. You're not in any trouble, kid. But, this feels wrong. Izuku yelled. I worked with a villain. I shouldn't just be able to get away with it. He felt a hand on his shoulder and he looked up to see All Might looking down at him. Young Midoriya. By answering our questions you could give us information that could lead to the dismantling of his plans. That is more than enough to make up for working with him. We questioned the young lady you created, Nizu said. She seems like a fine future hero that could save a lot of lives. Even if she is a result of you working with All for One, it is an undoubtedly positive thing. Izuku didn't know what to say, so he just cried some more. After 15 minutes Izuku managed to stop crying. I want to ask you some more questions, Nizu said. Will you be able to answer them, or do you need a few more minutes? Izuku sniffed. I'm fine. Thank you. Alright. Now I noticed earlier you said androids. As in plural. Nizu pointed out. Izuku nodded. Yes. All for One said he would give me the materials and resources I needed to build Tsukue if I built him an android as well. What? All Might gasped. Can you tell us more about the android you made him? Nizu asked. Izuku nodded. He had a lot of requests for how he wanted it to look. He wanted it to have messy white hair, pale skin, and red eyes. He also wanted it to be a child somewhere between 9 and 11. Messy white hair, pale skin, and red eyes? Why does that sound familiar? All Might wondered. Also, I made Tsukue by using other people's brain waves as a baseline to form new brain waves, making them a whole new person, Izuku explained. But All for One wanted something different for his android. He asked me to use just those brainwaves, making it a copy of whoever they got the brainwaves from. But not only that, when I looked at the brainwaves I found that they were cut off at a certain point. So it seems All for One wanted you to recreate a person. Nizu theorized. And he wanted that person to only remember up to a certain point, perhaps only up to where they were a child. But why? Naomasa asked. Did you give this android any weapons? Izuku shook his head. No. Strangely enough, he asked specifically that he have no weapon systems whatsoever. It still has some super strength, but any pro hero would almost certainly be able to beat it. So if I had to guess, whoever he had me build had a strong sentimental connection to him. Suddenly it clicked. His brother. All Might yelled. Now he remembered why that description sounded familiar. The first user of One for All. He had seen him in a vision once and he matched that description exactly. It must be his brother. There isn't anyone else that monster could possibly have a connection to that strong enough to warrant going out of his way and revealing himself. I suppose that makes sense, Nizu said. Midoriya. When did you finish building these androids? About 2 months ago, Izuku answered. That's around the time All for One sent you that letter. Naomasa realized. You're right, All Might said. But why would he revive his brother so close to his death? Wait. Death? Izuku butt in. Well, I don't think he had much of a choice, Nizu said, ignoring Izuku completely. I don't think anyone but Izuku could basically revive the dead. I can't really revive the dead. Izuku, but in again. It's more like I created a copy of that person. Like a clone but made of metal. Also, what do you mean by close to his death? Yagi was sent a letter by All for One stating that he had just died. Naomasa. And what you said about his injuries makes that seem more believable. Wait, why did he give Mr. Yagi a letter? Izuku asked. There was a brief silence in the room before Nizu spoke up. Midoriya, could you wait a moment while we talk outside? The principal said. Sure? Izuku said. He felt like he was in way over his head. The adults left the room once more and stood outside of the office. What are we gonna tell him? All Might asked. Everything, Nizu said. The two looked at him like he was crazy. Nizu, do you really want to tell all these important, dangerous secrets to a 15-year-old? Naomasa asked. That could make him a target. He created life. Nizu pointed out. He will never not be a target now. He also already knows about All for One, and I have a plan for him that would require him to know about these things. And what plan is that? All Might asked. Just trust me, Nizu said. The other two sighed. They hated when Nizu tried to be dramatic. Well, you're the one with the intelligence quirk, Naomasa said. The adults walked back into the room. All right, Midoriya, we have some very important things to tell you, Nizu said. These things are to remain top secret at all times. You are not allowed to tell anyone about what you hear in this room today. Do you understand? Izuku gulped and nodded his head. What have I gotten myself into? And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, share the video and support the original writer. See you in the next video?